the fact that EMS stretchers waited 5 hours outside the emergency room just to get triaged. So imagine calling 911, expecting to see a doctor immediately, only to wait in line outside in the dark at 30, 40-degree weather, waiting to be triaged, where you can still be sent to the waiting room, or wait in the emergency room where you still have to wait for a provider or doctor, for anyone to see you. That is the reality. And where the doctor you spoke with last time, he's speaking about the ICU upstairs, I'm downstairs in the emergency room. They're already dying in the emergency room. All right, they're not even making it to upstairs because it's so full. Every single hospital I've worked in is full.
How many New York City hospitals have you worked in?
I've lost count at this point, nearly a dozen. I think I'm in double digits at this point.
Wow.
They're all become a blur to me. I can't even recall when I worked where at this point, because every day I'm in a different emergency room.
Wow, and the situation from what you describe it is unfortunately similar in all of those. We've heard about this question about equipment, and ventilators has been the focus of the governor. You may have heard Governor Cuomo talking about that number of 30,000. The president has openly questioned whether that will be needed. The governor says he's looking at projections that say we may need that. Whatever the case may be, the data I saw this morning was that 1,600 coronavirus patients in New York are in intensive care units. And that number has gone up by 22% in a day. And most of those people, right, doctor, would need a ventilator, or a good high number of them. So what is that situation really like in terms of the need for that particular piece of equipment, ventilators?
Ideally, as a physician, you want to do everything for your patient that you're seeing. We're not in that ideal world anymore. It's now about doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people, which means we may have to make choices and sacrifices that we're not accustomed to doing, and that includes rationing ventilators. The data is public. You can go to the New York State Health Government website, and they have 242 pages of published data in the PDF file on how they ration ventilators, and they even have the numbers, which is very accurate from what we're seeing. In a 6-week period, they expect 90,000 ventilators to be used. They only have 10,000, including the ones in stockpile, available in New York State. You ship 3,000 more, it's still a drop in the bucket, right? You ship 30,000 more, that still leaves 50,000 patients without ventilators by their projection in a 6-week pandemic. This was published in November 2015, and our numbers are slowly getting to that apex. And I think we just started. A week ago, I said that I feel like the system is collapsing. To this week now, to wait 5 hours in a stretcher outside for triage when you call 911, I think is a sign of the system is collapsing. When those people who call 911 are more likely the ones that need a ventilator, but they're outside. So the situation is dire, and the numbers are not adding up.
Have you actually seen a doctor have to make the type of choice that you alluded to that we know for a fact has been made in Italy? Has that choice or the rationing of this type of equipment had to be made in your personal experience here yet in New York?
I am one of those doctors that made those kind of decisions internationally in my training. And I'm one of the few who unfortunately had to be put in that position. In this pandemic here in New York City, I have not personally seen an ER doctor, thankfully yet, decide who gets the ventilator or who doesn't. I know we're at a stage right now where just about hitting a soft aspect of that ventilator allocation guidelines that's published on the New York State Health website, where we are having protocols now being put in place, committees are being formed, where we are now designing a soft rollout of implementing those guidelines of rationing care. They don't specifically deal with ventilators per se, but really just overall, how much resources can you devote to things like cardiac arrests and people over a certain age with a lot of comorbidities who come in for certain things. Those things are now being heavily considered. It is slowly becoming a reality. For ventilators specifically, I do know that my colleagues at other hospitals, one hospital is down to one ventilator left, where they are now probably giving one ventilator from one person to another just to keep the other person alive. Whether the other person they took the ventilator off died or actually did better and therefore they were able to wean them off, I don't have those details, But ideally, we never had to do that in the first place. Both of them would have ventilators. So it's not going to be all of an overnight sudden change. It's going to be a slow rollout of that, and I'm already witnessing that.
I'm just sitting here thinking, what has caused this? Why has society waited for so long to initiate the severity in all this? Just like, why has it taken so long for the White House? This is the 27th of March. I know for a fact within the first week and a half, it was already being on our mainstream media over here towards what was going on in China. So you take from January, February, March, the first part of January, first part of February, and March, it has been almost 7 to 8 full complete weeks that has passed before now people are starting to grab the bull by the horns and acting like they're concerned about the citizens that's going to be suffering in such of a untold way. I've asked myself the question, what has done this? What has caused this? And the first thing I thought of course, was the deceitfulness, the lies. People in upper epillage pertaining to government, federal government, state government, for some reason was in a state of denial, are acting like that they was in a state of denial. If the truth be known, they was actually wanting it to elevate to this level so that people would stop dropping like flies before they ever stepped in. And some may say, oh, Dennis, for surely to God, you don't think that the people, the leaders of this country, pertaining to your local, state, and federal authorities are that cruel and insensitive, do you? Yes, I do. And I want to tell you what lines up that helps to validate that statement. You take an authority figure, federal, state, or local, that has waited this long before they started looking at the gun issue pertaining to all the mass shootings in this country that began shortly after 2006. I think Virginia Tech was the first mass shooting. 2006. So it's taken almost 14 years, 13, 14 years before society over here finally started looking at this in a more serious manner. To where you can take a country like New Zealand that had one occurrence and they immediately acted upon what went on over there pertaining to taking people's assault rifles away from them. Okay? But what I'm thinking is that the people has become so spellbound because of all the lies and deceit on TV. And if it wasn't coming from one organization, it was coming from another. You know, whenever it gets to the point that your whole credibility is shot, regardless whether it's your political credibility or your spiritual credibility or just your financial credibility towards lying to the general public, and the public gets used to hearing lie after lie after lie, they get callous to that. Okay? They get callous to that because it's kind of like the person that kept crying wolf, wolf, wolf. Well, after you cry wolf a certain amount of times, eventually the cry of wolf no longer holds the same meaning. Because you start to realize, oh yeah, right, he's cried wolf before. She's cried wolf before. Are you falling for that, Joe? Oh no, I ain't falling for that. Oh, no way am I falling for that. So they have created this fake facade in the eyes of the general public that basically everything that the people are looking at is a Hollywood script, something that is happening in La La Land, in a faraway place that won't never, ever come home to us. Won't never, ever get in our neighborhood. Won't never, ever sink into our school system. And it has taken calamity after calamity after calamity. And even with all the calamities pertaining to all the school shootings and all the other mass shootings, if you'll combine that with all the hurricanes, all the tornadoes, all the droughts as pertaining to the fires, all the flooding, it was not waking a society up over here that had become dumbified. Not just numbified, but dumbified. In other words, they was not reading the signs. And I'm talking about preachers. I'm talking about people that knows the Bible. That should have known that this thing was way out of kilter. Way back when, whenever we started having these warm winters. This winter, I have yet to see any accumulating snow on the ground in northwest Tennessee within 30 miles of the state Kentucky line. Within 100 miles or less of the Illinois state line. I have yet to see a snow in the year 2019 leading into 2020 on the ground here in northwest Tennessee. All these little occurrences, and whenever I say little, it wasn't little. Hurricane Katrina wasn't little. I don't forgot how many billions of dollars that sunk out of the economy. It seemed like it was something like 40 billion. I may be wrong about that estimate. May have been more like 400 billion. I don't know. But I know it was way, way up there. And of course, if you add the catastrophes that's hit out west and all the flooding pertaining to the farmland, if you'll add all these other catastrophes that continue to keep hitting again and again and again, just like the island, the 2 islands that's been hit recently of hurricane, how can you put a price tag on that? Whenever you alter a whole society, a whole culture of people, in actuality, how can you put a price tag on something like that? But I've asked the question, how come it has taken so long for the American people to come out of this haze, to come out of this being spellbound? And it goes back naturally to Satan, pertaining to Satan having these type of powers over society to the degree that they don't wake up. They don't believe what they hear. They don't believe what they see. You know, it's one thing whenever I was growing up that you don't believe half of what you see and you don't believe nothing you hear. Well, whenever it reaches the point that you don't believe nothing you hear and you don't believe nothing you see, you're reaching a climax with a society that has become dangerous. Dangerous in the form of accepting reality towards what reality has thrown at it. And we're not talking about some Mickey Mouse down in Disney World or down in Six Flags. We're not talking about some tooth fairy tale. We're talking about reality. Something that the American people hasn't been related to for quite some time. Now, granted, they create their own realities. They create their own realities because there's actually people out there that do, in fact, believe in Santa Claus. There's people out there that do, in fact, believe in the fairy tale. pertaining to the Tooth Fairy. There's people out there that do indeed believe in the Easter Bunny. Don't ask me how that this has occurred, but it's got to do with the mind. And it's got to do with the spirit. And it's got to do with something supernatural that has fallen upon to society, that has caused society to be grafted this way. And the only thing that I can think of is that with the working of TV and radio, and of course, if you compile that with Facebook and all these other social media platforms, it has created an atmosphere of toxicity. And now we're fixing to see just exactly how toxic that this atmosphere truly was or is. Because I personally was putting out literature to not just to Homeland Security, not just to retired U.S. Marshals, not just to governors in various places, but I was putting out material to law enforcement agencies, judges, mayors, all the locals around here. I was putting out all kinds of material going out in Phoenix, Arizona, material going out in California, material going out in Arizona. Phoenix, Arizona. I don't already mentioned that. Material going out in Florida. Material going out basically all over the country since the second week of January of how severe that this sickness that was going on over there in China truly actually was. I kept telling my viewers again and again and again, this is not Hollywood. People need to take this serious. This is not Hollywood. People need to take this serious. And for some unknown strange reason, and that's what I'm sitting here trying to figure out, what would be the answer to that unknown strange reason that has basically come in and deceived over 3 million people at the same time. And it had to be a supernatural force working through various elements, various tools such as TV, radio, satellite, social media, working through our government, federal, state, and local government, working through various people that would not accept reality in the format that reality should have been accepted as. Kind of like what happened during 9/11. I still to this day have not figured out how come that a group of people, just a small group of people, could bamboozle the American people in deceiving them in not attacking the very people that attacked us. To this day, I'm still at awe towards how in the world could the evangelical being, supernatural, evil, demonic beings ever had that much power to the degree that they could have actually pulled the wool over the American people's eyes. Well, guess what? Guess what? This time, it's going to cost you severely. Because you was not on your toes. You was too lax. You thought that it never could happen to you. You was in denial. And now, it's just like the Walmart slogan. Coming near a neighborhood near you. This president should walk away from his position towards being president. It is that bad. It is that disgraceful towards what has happened here. Whenever you have a country that is fixing to wreak this much horror because of a president and his administration that was not on top of their toes towards understanding the seriousness of all of this, he should pack up his suitcase, take his wife, take his daughter, take his son, take his administration, and walk off the job. Because what he has done, he has caused excess mental harm, spiritual harm, and of course financial as well as physical harm to the American people that we should not have to be engaged in right now if we would have had a decent man up there that could keep his eye on the ball towards understanding what he was looking at. Him being unqualified in this way. And I ain't going to lie to you, I blame the whole administration. I blame Pence, I blame all of them. Because it was not looked upon in a factual, reality type form. Now there's no doubt, you don't need to create panic. You don't need to create panic to take things on a serious level. You didn't have to act like that the sky was falling in regards to this pandemic. You didn't have to put on false gestures that the end of the world was coming. The end of the world was coming. But at the same time, it should have been acknowledged in the right format of the way that it should have been acknowledged in. Just like the North Koreans had kept saying in their love letters back and forth to Trump. And I don't know what the love letter said. And to be quite honest with you, I don't want to know what the love letter said. It makes me sick in thinking about it towards seeing the carnal damage that's fixing to befall here upon to the United States. But whenever you have an idiot such as Kim Jong that kept saying, "Oh, we got a Christmas present coming," and it really it brought a lot of concern to the intelligent world, because they was expecting for Kim Jong to possibly pop off another big rocket and shoot it maybe towards Hawaii or shoot it in some direction towards it having some sort of a ballistic missile or a nuclear missile on it. But the whole time it wasn't a missile. It wasn't a missile. Because Kim Jong knew that if he'd have sent a missile over here, it'd have got shot out of the sky and it would have costed him and his country dearly. You take this for what it's worth. That guy over there has been wanting to take center stage for quite some time towards wanting to dominate the world. The same thing pertaining to the Taliban. The same thing pertaining to those idiots over in the Middle East that basically announced war on the United States. I think it was in '93 that they was going to war with the United States, and made a pledge that not only did they want Jerusalem completely annihilated from the planet, but they also wanted America completely annihilated from the planet. Whenever you have that type of thinking that's not just going on in the Middle East, but that type of thinking that's going on over in China and over in Korea, North Korea, as well as South Korea, now they'll tell you that they're our friends. They'll tell you that they'll bend over backwards for us. But at the same time, they'll steal from us, they'll take from us, and they're deliberately trying to bring harm and hurt to us in one form or another, all the way from A to Z. And you can figure it out on your own, what's going on here. But to sit and hear somebody like this talk about the true reality of what's going on right now in New York City, it just absolutely breaks my heart to the degree that it just makes me want to sit here and bawl and squall. It is time for the American people to hold our officials in accountability, regardless whether it be federal, state, or local officials, regardless whether it be a judge, a sheriff, a mayor, or any of the above. From the bottom all the way to the top, or the top all the way to the bottom. It's time for the American people to hold these people accountable and responsible, because we pay them the money that we pay them so that it will prevent from this happening. Whenever 9/11 happened, immediately everybody in the federal institutions or the federal government should have been fired and should have been looking for another job. We do not treat our officials over here the same way that other countries do. How come is that? How come whenever another leader gets caught with their hand in the cookie jar, or they don't do what they have promised that their citizens will do, and they haven't protected them in the way that they'll protect, the way that they promised them that they would protect them, how come the citizens in other parts of the world will railroad them out on a railroad, but America rewards them? America puts them in a higher position. America is lenient towards them. I'm going to tell you why. Because they have been bamboozled. They have been bamboozled by the system, and of course, the demonic system is what has bamboozled the people. Well, now, reality is fixing to hit the Americans right upside the face. And we have no one to blame. I'm going to repeat this one more time. We have no one to blame but ourselves, because we have sat idly by and we have let this happen. No one was willing to stand up to them. No one was willing to oppose them. No one was willing to put them in their place. And now we're all fixing to suffer immensely. Just like whenever there's a hurricane, various people suffer. Whenever there's a tornado, various people suffer. When there's a flood, or when there's a famine, various people suffer. When there's a mass shooting, regardless whether it be in Las Vegas or a nightclub in Orlando, Florida, or a church or a school, various people suffer. We was not waking up to the various people that was suffering. So now God has put it on a bigger scale. Now, instead of just a few over here, or a few over there, or a few over here suffering, now the whole darn bunch is fixing to suffer. And like a bunch of idiots, we'll turn around and we'll vote somebody like Mike Wilson back in power, not the second time, not the third time, not the fourth time, even though drugs has inundated this county, not the fifth time, not the sixth time, not the seventh time, or the eighth, but he has been elected back to back on 9 different elections. Now you tell me what the hell happened to the country and what the hell happened to the people. They were subjected to a demonic influence. And in this demonic influence, they have become bamboozled and deceived. It's one of the most sickening sights that I think my eyes and my heart has ever been laid upon. And for this bunch around here to either attack or sit back and allow for the innocent to be attacked, regardless whether it be my life or someone else's, speaks once more volumes about society over here in America. Not counting what it speaks over in Germany, not counting what it speaks for over in the Middle East, not counting what it speaks of in China or North Korea or South Korea. This has got to be the most horrendous, sickening event that I have ever been able to lay my eyes on. And you keep in mind, whenever the event happened in 1918, pertaining to the Spanish flu that did in fact start over in Kansas somewhere. Okay? People didn't have TV. Most people didn't even have radio. They barely knew what was going on over the hill or down in the valley or over in the gorge or over in the next town. They may have heard some things that was going on in your bigger cities because they had a little more newspapers and better radio whenever you would hook up the battery to the radio and stuff. But by and large, people only knew what was going on basically next door to them. Today, we don't just see what's going on next door. We see what's going on the door beyond the next door, and the door beyond that door, and the door beyond that door, and several other doors beyond those doors. You know why? Because we have communications today. We have communications today to where we know that if something happens over in another foreign country, within a matter of minutes, it's already being publicized, and we're aware of what's going on over here. So there's no excuse for our leaders that stand in the White House that should not have taken the events that was going on in China, even in the month of December of 2019, excuse me. I'm 100 years off. In 2019, they should have known the severity and the seriousness of everything to start prepping and preparing the American people. Not just the American people, but the world. Because we're supposed to be the leader of the free world. We haven't just let the Americans down, we've let the world down of the severity of this pandemic. It's absolutely heartbreaking for me to sit here and watch this on a day-to-day, everyday level, but yet now I would like to take a break from it and go to the river or go to the lake and get away from it, but I'm afraid that if I do, too many innocent lives are going to be affected. Too many souls are going to go to hell. Too many people are going to be subject of being a victim.
And we're still 2 to 3 weeks away from that apex that you alluded to, according to Governor Cuomo, at least in the projections he's been given. Dr. Sutton, I don't know that we have to do this, but we should anyway. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing, but also thank you for coming on with us and sharing the concerns that you have to draw attention to all of that. All the best to you and your colleagues.
Thank you.
Look at your Dow Jones over there, down 915 points. Now, they'll brag about the past 3 days towards it going up. Oh, it went up. Oh, we gained this many points. It is a freaking joke in how the big guy is playing with the little guy. I guarantee you, eventually this thing will plummet probably below 18. I'm making a forecast that the high number that you're looking at right there will go below 18 before it's over with, because this is a worldwide pandemic. They can try to put a Band-Aid on it. You know, they can continue to keep kicking the can down the road up there in Washington, D.C. You know, where did this $2.3 trillion come from? Was it taken out of some other entity, out of the government? Or was it just applied to the $23 trillion that we already know has already stood? So putting Band-Aids on the problem is not fixing the problem. Kicking the can down the road is not fixing the problem. It's just like the little farmer that planted the bean crop or the corn crop. Once your crop comes up and you realize it didn't but a third of it come up towards it being good fertile, in good fertile ground, having good fertile beans or good fertile corn, you got two choices. You can either live with it and hope for the best, in which you can hope in one hand and poo-poo in the other and see which one fills up the quickest. Or you can disc it all under and start all over again and do it better the second time. So it's pretty obvious what the government in America has chosen to do. They have chosen to leave the third of the crop growing, even though they know that it's not producing and they know that it's going to be a bad yield. And whenever I'm using the crop for an example or an illustration compared to the people, the American already knew, just like whenever they legalized homosexuality in this country, They knew that there was too many people that was ushering into sin. And the only way that they could justify towards grabbing up their marriage taxes, well, let's just legalize homosexuality. That way we'll still have the same power over the homosexual marriage as we did the heterosexual marriage. That was another band-aid. That was another excuse for the government to kick the can down the road a little further. Rather than addressing the problem, they went at it in a different direction.
That's what I'm here for.
And the thing about it is, every time that they have done that, they know that it's pissing the big guy off upstairs, and they know that it's going to bring that much more hardship upon society in one form or another. And if it doesn't come in one form, it'll come in another form. They've known that. They've known what the Bible says. They've known what's happened to other past generations and other past cultures. They've known that. They're not stupid. They have deliberately brought a hardship upon to society. Just like the coronavirus. They have deliberately set back and remain idle and lame to the point that now we're all going to have to suffer. And I'm just wondering, out of the people suffering, if there's anybody out there that's going to challenge them. If there's anybody out there that's going to stand up to them. Regardless whether it be a local official, a state official, or a federal official. I've never seen a group of people that was so spineless in my entire life. Ever. Ever. If this stuff would have went on back in my grandmother and grandfather's days, they would have went up to the White House and taken a bunch of bulldozers and backhoes, and they would have bulldozed it down to the ground. And they would have reformulated a brand new government, a brand new system, even at the expense of a civil war. They would have went in there and they would have done what they needed to do. And they would not have allowed for the government to have bamboozled them or hoodooed them in the way that they've been hoodooed. And once more, now we all suffer the consequences on the count of bad leadership. Poor, pissy poor, bad leadership.
Calvin Sun with us, New York City Hospital ER physician. All right, receiving some much needed relief. We're going to talk coming.
That was a doctor you just got through listening to. That wasn't just a Korean or wherever he was from. That was somebody that had a head full of sense, that probably had all kinds of degrees and master degrees and diplomas hanging on his wall. That was somebody speaking the truth to power.
Up about a 1,000-bed Navy hospital ship that's arriving in California today, trying to help the hospitals out there who are expecting their own surge and already seeing a surge in patients. We're on the ground in L.A. at the port of Los Angeles.
I'm going to fast forward this because the president's supposed to be signing this bill real quick. Let me see if we can't go to it real quick before I disconnect. I don't know about y'all, but this BS is just disheartening to me. See, and they do it like a Broadway show. That they'll bring it up, the president's fixing to speak. The president's fixing to speak. 30 minutes later, the president's fixing to speak. See, there they go. They got the White House showing again. The president. Now, hang on.
$1 trillion.
Let's back up. Let's hear what this guy's got to say.
Forth on ventilators. We've seen, the major automakers had said they would convert their plants to go ahead and help make those ventilators. And then you see...
And that's been all done on voluntary scale.
The president signing the Defense Production Act for GM. Let's listen in and see what he says here.
Signed, it's $2.2 billion, but it actually goes up to $6.2 potentially trillion dollars. So you're talking about a $6.2 trillion bill, nothing like that. And this will deliver urgently needed relief to our nation's families, workers, and businesses.
That should have been addressed a month ago. You're kind of a day late and a dollar short whenever you're talking about collateral damage. There ain't no telling how many people's going to die because of this.
And that's what this is all about. And it got a
No, that ain't what just this is all about. We understand what it's all about. Yeah, we're not stupid, Mr. President.
96 to nothing. And I don't know, what was the number in Congress? What was
Where's the hostess? Where's
the voice? It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Just as close.
That's pretty amazing. That's about the same thing, right, Kevin? I
Yes.
think? So that's fantastic. But I want to thank Republicans and Democrats for coming together, setting aside their differences, and putting America first. This legislation provides for direct payments to individuals and unprecedented support to small businesses. We're going
Now, out of that bunch that you're looking at right there, I wonder how much of that money, that 6-point-something trillion dollars, is going to wind up being funneled back into those individuals that's standing around the president, including the president right now. Why the president wants to take his finger and point it at Joe Biden's son that supposedly walked away with $1.5 billion over the China or over the Russian deal. So you have to wonder, the average everyday citizens, out of those people that's doing what they're doing, regardless whether it be the senator from Kentucky or the vice president or whoever, you know, this guy right here, you know, whenever he got on board, you can't see his face right now. He got on board whenever the president wound up going to Switzerland. Somehow or another, he picked this guy up. Probably a multi-billionaire. Just wanted to get his face on TV towards being a part of the show, part of the pony show. That's where this guy here come from, somewhere in that area. There ain't no telling where he come from, really. But I know he climbed on board. You know, they lie to the American people. They don't tell us the truth. They tell us half-truths. We still don't know about this guy's income tax, of what the record shows pertaining to his businesses. He's probably hoping that this $2.2 trillion is going to be a big stimulus package to all his hotels and his motels all over the world. I'm telling you, folks, these people, and this ain't the first bunch that has done it. It has been going on now since the Nixon era. Whenever Nixon stood on national TV and said, "I am not a crook." Yes, he was. But not only was he a crook, but the whole administration and the bunch that he was surrounded himself with. The whole White House and the Capitol, from the White House all the way down to the outhouse, was nothing but a bunch of crooks. They're supposed to be going in there working for we the people. How come whenever they go to work, making only a certain salary, they wind up making 100 times their salary before they ever get ready to leave office? I'm just going to use Dick Cheney for an illustration, and there's many more that I could use for illustrations. But Dick Cheney went to work for the Vice President Bush, Mr. Bush, as him being president, as being vice president, valued at $4 million, and whenever he left office, he was valued at $40 million. How do you do that in an 8-year term, only making about $200,000 a year, or maybe $250,000 a year? You don't, unless you got something else going under the table. And that's where these guys make their money. They make their money, their politics, which is nothing more than a tick that gets onto something and draws all the blood out of it. Their politics, and they do things in a professional way, and ultimately, instead of them up there working for we the people, they'll make it look like, we're doing this for the people. And you ain't going to get no kickback on it? You ain't going to be like Dick Cheney that created Halliburton and wound up walking away with $40 million that you originally only had $4 million, and God only knows what Halliburton's worth now. I hope the whole oil industry completely shuts down because of what the Saudis is doing right now towards bringing the oil market down. They claim that that's been a bad hit on the American oil production producers here in America, because they can't drain it out of the ground. They can't get it out of the ground and produce it cheap enough to still make a profit off of it, because the way that the Saudis is doing right now. Once more, we'll sit back and we'll let another country hurt us. We'll sit back and allow politicians to hurt us while we all do the suffering, do the consequences, while they're pulling the wool over people's eyes.
We keep our small businesses strong and our big businesses strong, and that's keeping our country strong and our jobs strong. This historic bill includes the following: $300 billion in direct cash payments will be available to every American citizen earning less than $99,000 per year. $3,400 for a typical family.
Notice what they done here, and I don't know why they done it, but it's after 4 o'clock my time. The stock market has now shut down. It's locked. It won't go up or down. It is what it is. Usually they time it whenever the stock market is already struggling towards going up. They'll time it whenever a big announcement like this is happening, that it just pushed the stock market up that much even further. Well, they messed up today because of the haggling, and they didn't get the bill over to the president in time. So this is kind of backfired on them today towards not making the Dow Jones look as good as what they probably was hoping for. Once more, another way to bamboozle, another way to lie to the American people and the workforce on the planet.
Family of four, so family of four, $3,400. And then $350 billion.
Let's back it up. We want to get to most of this. I'll shut up.
Our job strong. This historic bill includes the following: $300 billion in direct cash payments will be available to every American citizen earning less than $99,000 per year. $3,400 for a typical family of four. So family of four, $3,400. And then $350 billion in job retention loans for small businesses, with loan forgiveness available for businesses that continue paying their workers. The workers get paid. Approximately $250 billion in expanded unemployment benefits. The average worker who has lost his or her job will receive 100% of their salary for up to 4 full months. So things like this have never happened in our country. $500 billion in support for hard-hit industries, with a ban on corporate stock buybacks. We don't let them buy back the stock. We don't let that happen. And tough limits on executive compensation. Over $100 billion to support our heroic doctors, nurses, and hospitals. And you see what's happening.
That's not near enough. $100 billion? That's not near enough.
And I want to thank, while we're here, also the incredible job that's done by the Army Corps of Engineers and by FEMA. It's been incredible. They did 4 hospitals in 2 days or 3 days in New York, and they're like incredible structures. What a job they've been doing, and they're doing them all over the country. $45 billion for the Disaster Relief Fund, supporting our state, local, and tribal leaders. $27 billion for the development of vaccines, therapies, and other public health response efforts, including $16 billion to build up the strategic national stockpile with critical stockpiles. And we have tremendous supplies coming into the stockpile, and you'll be seeing that and hearing about it a little bit, because we're doing a news conference at 5:30 on what's happening. We've had tremendous results on the respirators. We've had great results on just about everything we're talking about. Boeing just announced that they're going to be making the plastic face shields, the actual shields, which are hard to come by, and they're going to be making them by the thousands a week. And the ventilators, which is probably the most difficult, because it's like building a car. We will be announcing thousands are going to be built, and we have them under contract, and we have fast deliveries. As you know, we delivered thousands to New York, and unfortunately they were delivered to a warehouse, which was good. Unfortunately, they didn't take them, but now they're taking them. New York is now taking them and redistributing them around the areas that they need. So you have also $3.5 billion to states to expand child care benefits for healthcare workers, first responders, and others on the front lines of this crisis, and $1 billion for securing supplies under the Defense Protection Act. And as you know, I've enacted the act. We've used it 3 or 4 times. I pulled it back 3 times because the companies came through in the end. They didn't need the act. It's been great leverage. I have instituted it against General Electric. We thought we had a deal for 40,000 ventilators, and all of a sudden the 40,000 came down to 6,000. And then they talked about a higher price than we were discussing, so I didn't like it. So we did activate it with respect to General Motors, and hopefully maybe we won't even need the full activation. We'll find out. But we need the ventilators. I said hello today. I called him a wonderful guy, Boris Johnson. As you know, he tested positive. And before he even said hello, he said, "We need ventilators." I said, wow, that's a big statement. And hopefully he's going to be in good shape. I just spoke to Angela Merkel, and she's quarantined also. She is right now for a period of 2 weeks being forced to stay in her house. So this is just an incredible situation. Last night I spoke to President Xi. We talked about the experience that they had in China and all of the things that have taken place, and we learn a lot. They've had a very tough experience, and they're doing well, and he's doing well. President Xi is doing very well, but we learned a lot, and we have great communication together. We're going to be sent great data from China, things that happen that they see that they've had an early experience, and we're getting all of that information. Much of it has already been sent. It was sent yesterday and sent to our scientists to study. So we'll have more on that also. We'll be discussing that at 5:30. I just want to thank the people behind me. They've been incredible friends. They've been warriors. There's nobody tougher or smarter than the people standing alongside of me. And I think I want to start off by asking Mitch and then Kevin to speak, and then we're going to go through a few of the folks in the room if they'd like to say something. But Mitch, I'd love you to say a few words, because this man worked 24 hours a day for a long time. This is the result. It's the biggest ever approved in Congress, $6.2 trillion. So, you know, we used to get used to the billion. It used to be million, then it was billion, now it's trillion. And it's going to go a long way. It's going to make a lot of people very happy. Mitch McConnell, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, let me just say this is a proud moment for our country, for the President, the Republicans, and the Democrats all pulled together and passed the biggest bill in history in record time. I also want to thank Kevin McCarthy and our leaders on the Republican side in the House who helped speed this through to passage. The American people needed this rescue package. They needed it quickly, and we delivered. It's a proud moment for all of us. Mr. President, thanks for the opportunity to be here.
I'd love to shake your hand, but Anthony would get angry at me if I so I better not do it. I can't. It's so natural. I just want to go back and shake his hand. They've done such an incredible job. Kevin, please.
Yeah, I do want to start. I want to thank all. The real answer to America is we're listening to you. You do your part, and we're going to do ours, and that's exactly what's happening today. What Leader McConnell did was amazing. He made it bipartisan, bicameral. Everybody was involved. I wish we could have signed this earlier this week. Maybe there wouldn't be as many people who are out of work, but this will put people back to work. I also want to thank Secretary Mnuchin. You've done an amazing job, and we thank you for that, and all the team that's here. Look, as I said in my speech, the virus is here. We didn't ask for it. We didn't invite it. We didn't choose it, but we are going to defeat it together, because we're going to work together, and this is the first start of it. The hospitals will get money, the money they need. The small businesses will be able to hire their employees back. That is a grant. You don't have to borrow from that place. The other businesses get a retention to keep your employees on. This has something for everything, and to the task force and the vice president, all the work that you're doing with this president, this will be the needed resources you need as well. And so thank you for that, and thank you for your leadership, Mr.
Very
President.
special. Mike Pence, Mike, could you please say something? You've been working very hard in charge of our task force, and then I'd like to ask Steve to say a few words.
And there's no doubt they've all been working hard, because this was thrown upon to them unbeknownst what was happening right during or after the impeachment trial. So they've all finally stepped up to the plate towards earning their keep. But in ways, it was a day late and a dollar short pertaining to the fatalities and the catastrophes that's going on, not just in New York, but it's going to be happening in every major monetary system, metropolitan area, including out into suburban areas. So this is a catastrophe. Thank God they finally got off their rear ends and they finally done the right thing. But it's almost a day late and a dollar short, because it should have been initiated and looked at in a more serious matter, give or take about the 3rd, maybe the 4th week of January, which would have put us all 6 to 8 weeks in front of where we are now. Once more, that's spilt milk. There's nothing we can do about it now other than let the ball drop where the ball's going to drop, in not only with the stimulus program, but also with who should be held responsible and accountable in these matters, which will be dealt with on a later day, towards people being held to the fullest extent of the law, especially those that was in positions that could have done something but chose idly by towards not doing nothing. Similar towards what's went on with the gun issue that has just recently, in the past couple years, got on the front burner towards us doing something about. That a country like New Zealand can deal with it on the first occurrence, but we had to wait basically 13, 14 years later before we finally realized, oh wow, we really do got a problem here. Once more, I think a lot of it's got to do with the atmosphere of TV. We see TV every day and we think, oh wow, this is just another show. This is something that's been projected and something that's been dissected, put on there for us to look at and be entertained by. And I think a great deal of the American people should be held accountable because they did not accept reality in the degree that they should have been looking at towards the severeness of all this until it was basically too late. So hopefully, we're all going to learn a great dire lesson off of all this. Hopefully.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks for giving me the opportunity just to express all of our appreciation and the gratitude of the American people for the accomplishment that's reflected in the legislation that you'll sign in just a few moments. You told the American people that we would do whatever it takes. You called on the Congress to step forward to make coronavirus testing free for every American, to make paid family leave available. The Congress, with the leaders gathered around us here, stepped forward in a bipartisan fashion and delivered. But today, every American family, every American business can know that help is on the way. I want to thank Leader McConnell for his yeoman's work in really forging a bipartisan bill in the United States Senate. I want to thank Leader McCarthy for his great work. But as the President said, I also want to thank the Democrat and Republican leadership across the House and Senate. This is an American accomplishment. Mr. President, it's exactly what you asked the Congress to deliver for the American people. Okay.
Now I got a question. All that sounded fine and dandy. All them numbers sounded reasonable. But I got a question. Whenever you add this $6 trillion to the $23 trillion, which you put her up there, nip or tuck, around 30 trillion, probably by the fall, probably by the election time. 30 trillion. I don't know what the casualty level is going to be. No one knows right now what the fatality level is going to be. But let's just say you put her up around $30 trillion. After being engaged in a $30 trillion note, if another catastrophe hits, regardless whether it be a war, a severe drought, if the pandemic decides to come back over the earth for the second time, long about winter, and take out another third, or 10%, or 5%, or 2%, of the American people and cause this type of damage again? How are we going to fight it the second time after already being $30 trillion in debt? Where is there going to be an end to making this graffiti money and actually revaluing our system off of something that is much more secure other than the good old American dollar bill? That's my next question. Looking down the road 6 months or even into the November election that will lead us off into January, I think it's January the 20th is whenever they re-nominate either the same president or a new president. These are very, very unprecedented, perilous times that we're in right now. And I just hope to God, people that hear this message coming from the Windmill Ministries missions, that if they've never had a true relationship with God through the teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ, that they will do so before it is too late. Please, let's examine what is going on and what has gone on to prevent possibly the next generation that could be going through similar circumstances after we're all dead and gone, that maybe they can learn from our mistakes to where they won't have to make them towards going through such hardship like we have.
Thank you very much, Mike. And Steve Mnuchin, you know how hard he's been working. And Steve, please say a few words.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your leadership and for the Vice President's leadership. You made it very clear to us last week we should think big, that this was a war on the virus, and that we should have the resources to protect American workers and American business. And I'd like to thank the Senate. It was a great honor, Mitch, to work with you and everyone on a bipartisan basis to get this done. This is going to be a great thing for the American workers. And Kevin McCarthy, thank you for all the work in the House did to pass this quickly. So at Treasury, as I've said, we are committed to move forward quickly, and we're going to get money in people's pockets quickly. Thank you, Mr. President.
Great job, Steve. Gene, please.
This is a great day for American workers. Protecting American workers, American jobs has been a hallmark of this presidency, and this bill today is another very important step in that direction. It includes unprecedented support for American workers who've lost their jobs through no fault of their own, but because of this virus, and gives them as near as we could the same wage they would have gotten through unemployment insurance if they'd been able to keep their jobs for up to 4 months. I think even more important, it includes $350 billion in loans for small business, but structured in a way to incentivize them to keep their workers on payroll so that those loans can be forgiven at the end of the period. And it comes on top of legislation the President signed last week for paid leave for workers who have to be at home because of the virus. Paid leave reimbursed in full, dollar for dollar, to the employer. It's the first federal paid leave law for the private sector ever, and that also was achieved on an unprecedented bipartisan basis. This is the third major bipartisan piece of legislation in 3 weeks, 3 bills, 3 weeks, to address this virus. So again, I want to thank the President for his leadership, his commitment to American workers, the Vice President as well, and Leader McConnell, and also my colleague, Secretary Mnuchin, who did work so hard to help you get this done.
Dr. Fauci, you may want to just say for a minute what hit the world. Something hit the world, and the world maybe will never be quite the same, but we're going to make it a great place anyway. But certainly you can maybe say a few words about it.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank everyone involved in this. This is what America is all about, a bipartisan approach with your leadership to do something that's sorely needed by the American people. Dr. Birx and I and all of our medical people here are fighting the virus directly, but the virus has an impact on the American people, both directly by illness and death, but also indirectly because many of the things that we have to do to suppress the virus has a negative impact because of what we're doing. To give them relief economically is absolutely essential. So I feel really, really good about what's happening today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, perhaps you could say a few words.
So, is this going to mitigate the problem? Absolutely not. This will only soften the problem towards, hopefully, whenever it finally does disappear to the point that it's safe to stick your head out, hopefully a lot of the factories and a lot of the towns and a lot of the places will be able to take this and use it for a stimulant, kind of like a booster shot in the arm, to where they can get things back up and going again and running the way that it's supposed to be running. And I guess for right now, what they're doing with the $6 trillion eventually that will be passed out is that they will eventually pardon it or forgive it. And I'm pretty sure that that will probably go along with the rest of the $23 trillion towards basically starting all over again. I just don't know what they're going to start all over again with. You know, there has to be some sort of line drawn in the sand towards, are we going to continue to keep playing the same game, the same song and dance? Are we going to continue to keep making the same mistakes again and again and again? Are we going to learn from our mistakes and build an empire the way that our ancestors had developed an empire, to where it will basically be self-sustainable? And what I'm talking about here is basically the American government, the American empire. I'm not talking about the China Empire. I'm not talking about the Russian Empire. I'm not talking about the Indian Empire. Right now, I'm talking about the American Empire. The empire that our ancestors fought and died for and sweat and blood for, to make sure that we had things going on the way that they was supposed to be going on after they was dead and gone. Those are the people that we've let down in all of this.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Fauci covered it very well. As many of you know, I worked for him and he was my mentor 40 years ago. I think whenever we start with one of these very serious diseases and a pandemic, the president's first goal was ensuring the health of the American people, and that's why we put out these very strong guidance. It's been a pleasure to work with the economic team here, because they understand data in the same way. Economic data and health data is very similar in how you have to interpret it in a very granular way. And I think recognizing that the health of the American people is first, but the economic value of the nation is also critical. And I just want to thank all of you for what you've done for the American people today.
Great job you're doing too. Thank you. Kevin, please.
Before he speaks, looking at the big picture in a success, as far as an achievement moment, what this actually does is slap all communist control governments, regardless whether it's big or little, regardless whether it's Honduras, Russia, or China, or any other communist control country. It slaps them in the face and tells them, you know what? We can achieve. We can make it. Regardless whether it's through the good times or the bad times. We can set aside things that can be done that will protect our citizens for the next generation, beyond this generation. If it does anything at all today, in this historical, monumental moment, because of this catastrophe that has fallen upon the society, it speaks volumes to the communist control leadership by telling them the free, fair democracy way is the fairest, best way of all ways.
Just 20 days ago, I don't know that anyone could have imagined how hard we'd been hit, medically or economically. 20 days ago, I don't think anyone could have imagined Congress pulling together so quickly and so forcefully behind what the president identified we needed for this country. This is a proud moment for all of us, and it's just an example of what leadership can provide here in the White House, and then how we can respond as a Congress. So thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership.
I'm just saying, as Kevin's saying, that 20 days ago, a couple of days longer than that maybe, we had a smooth running, beautiful machine. We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We had the highest stock price we've ever seen. It went up, I think, 151 times during the course of the presidency. And then we got hit by the invisible enemy. And we got hit hard. But it wasn't just us. It was 151 countries, I think, as of this morning. And you call Germany and speak to Angela. She's in quarantine. And as you know, Boris was diagnosed that he's positive. And all of the things that are happening, it's hard to believe what's gone on just in a short period of time. And because of the talent behind me and lots of other talent in government, what we've done, this is a big part of it, obviously, but not the biggest part. Everybody's pulled together. Our nation's pulled together. The spirit is incredible. The people have pulled together more than anyone and better than anybody, and they're doing really, really well. But just to think how life can change, where you go 20 to 22 days ago, everything's perfect. We're looking forward. I'm saying, when are we going to hit 30,000? I want 30,000. That means more jobs and more everything. And then one day we get hit with this thing that nobody ever heard of before. Nobody ever even heard of before. And now we're fighting a different battle. But I really think in a fairly short period of time, because of what they've done and what everyone's done, I really think we're going to be stronger than ever. And we'll be protected from a lot of this. A lot of the things, Anthony, that we've done now, that we're doing now, are going to protect us in the future if this should happen again. From testing to so many other, even stockpiles, right? Vaccines. Yeah, the vaccines, hopefully, and vaccines, cures, therapeutics, whatever you want to call it. It's a lot of progress. And I think on that score, I think we're making a lot of progress on vaccines. We're making perhaps a lot of progress on cures and therapeutics. We'll be letting you know. Anybody else have anything? Greg, please. Go ahead, folks.
I would just say I've never seen you shy away from a challenge. Your leadership and your policies and this great team brought America this enormous economy, and guess what? You get to do it again. And this bill is the next step in that, and we can build back this economy with your leadership and with the healthcare team you've got here, too. We're doing the right thing for the American people, and they know that. I can tell you that from the ground. It's not easy. No. It's not easy. We don't want to shelter in place as Americans. We want to be out, especially in the Northwest. Yeah. But we know we have to do this for the safety of our relatives and families and our community and our country. So thanks.
We're not looking for charity. We're looking for an opportunity. We're looking for fairness. We don't want a free handout. We don't want a free handout. Not the majority of the people. They're looking for an opportunity. And to think that the rug got pulled out from underneath us back years ago whenever all the jobs went south and all the factories went south, how the communist controlled southern hemispheres stole our labor force. This is a monumental moment in slapping them upside the face and telling them, you know what, your communist controlled environment wasn't and isn't and never will be the fairest entity in governments, our government, that our government, the way that it functions, is a whole lot more fair in what we do and how we do it pertaining to our workers and our citizens here in America. So it does speak volumes today. This is a monumental moment, not just in dollars and cents monetarily, but in getting things accomplished towards two sides pulling together.
Your leadership.
It may have been a day late and a dollar short, but it still got done. 2 thumbs up. It got done. Thank God. It got done. Hallelujah.
Great team you've assembled.
Appreciate it very much.
Yeah. On behalf of small businesses, they're the backbone of the American economy. About half the people that work in America work for a small business, and they're hurting out there right now. I'm from Ohio. I'm the ranking member of the House Small Business Committee, and back there, non-essential small businesses are shut down. Without this legislation, it's questionable whether they would reopen. Because of this legislation, they now have a great chance of that, and those people that work for small businesses who are shuttered now will be paid. That's really important. This wouldn't have passed without your leadership, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Eric worked so hard. You all know Eric, and he was at Steve's side the whole way. And where is our man? Do I see Larry? Yeah, Larry. The two of them. How about Eric and then Larry say a couple of words? And
well, thank you very much, Mr. President. Really appreciate it, and Mr. Vice President as well. So, you encourage your team to be bold, be brave, and go big, and we certainly delivered today. $6.2 trillion is tremendous. So we've made sure that we can reassure Americans that their paycheck is protected and that their earnings are protected. We've made sure that we can provide significant reinforcement to the American economy as a result of your leadership. And finally, looking ahead to address the virus, we've included significant resources in order to ensure that those therapies and ultimately that vaccine can come online as quickly as possible. So protecting the public health and protecting the economic health of America is what you've directed us to do. And together with the team, we worked hard to deliver today. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
And Steve is going to work very hard on getting the money out quickly, and hopefully it can be distributed very quickly, especially when they have some old computer equipment that they have to use, but you're going to work on that very hard. Larry, please. Larry.
Oh, thanks, sir. Just hats off to Mitch McConnell. Did an amazing job, and House leadership as well. And I agree with the bipartisanship. I want to give special thanks to my friend Stephen Mnuchin, who I think did an extraordinary job. We were up there helping him out in one spot or another, but he's indefatigable and got it done. And I'll just say this, Mr. President, a few months ago, this economy was roaring, and we've hit this, literally this bug, this virus, and we will deal with it. And I think the assistance bill here, which does have growth incentives, will help lead us back to a very strong economic rebound before this year is over.
I think that too. I think we're going to have a tremendous rebound at the end of the year, toward the end of the year. I think we're going to have a rebound like we have never seen before. Even now, it wants to rebound. You can see it, feel it. It wants to rebound so badly. And, we've had those really big, I guess the biggest ever stock market surge 2 days ago, and yesterday was great.
The president right now signing the CARES Act, delivering relief to Americans. That does it for After the Bell. We hand it off now to Lou Dobbs.
Now I'm going to sign this, and it's a great honor. 6.2 trillion.
Good evening, everyone. I'm David Asman in for Lou Dobbs. Let's get right back to the White House. Listen.
This point, I don't think so, huh? All right, thank you all. But I wanted that to be a nice signature. Kevin, come on, fellas, come on over here. Elaine, what a job she's doing with transportation. How's transportation, okay?
We always talk about the supply chain.
I do.
It's really important.
I do.
This bill is going to help the supply chain and the workers.
Thank you very much. Anthony? Thank you. Thanks, Tony, very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Appreciate it.
Bob Lighthouser, thank you very much. Bob was a little less involved in this. He's too busy making trade deals. Okay, do you have one? Well, you definitely have to have one. You're awesome. Thank you, everybody. So we're going to have a 5:30 news conference in the same location. Seems to be doing quite well. And we appreciate everything, and we really appreciate the fairness, at least from most of the press. We really do. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
There was a rare moment of agreement today between you and Senator Kerry over this issue with Massey. Can you expand a bit on that?
Well, he made a little joke about a man named Congressman Massey. I thought he was totally out of line, Congressman Massey. Because of that, I guess a lot of people had to come back. And they had to go into a place which, frankly, we're not supposed to be in, in light of what we're doing with Deborah and Tony and all of the professionals. So people had to come back, and just no reason for it. So John Kerry made a little joke out of it, and I agreed with his joke, and I said I never knew he had that kind of a personality, but we actually put it up, and he was right. Okay, we'll see you in a couple of minutes, folks. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good job.
Virus, and had they done so, we might have been better prepared to.
An exhausting all-day affair. You drag all those different cleaners around and then have to climb up and down. Not anymore.
And most of all, keep together.
Crystal, full exterior. So fast, deep. Will.
Well, that is a powerful story. You know, I've got a lot of family members who are cops, EMTs, and nurses on the front line of this right in Connecticut, New York area. They wonder, why don't we have some of these medicines tested? Because back in 2003, there were emerging data showing that certain things like chloroquine and other things, something that the president mentioned recently, might work. But no one went ahead and did a clinical study on these things. And so 15 years passed. I went back and said, well, what did the NIH do during those 15 years? And the studies that we found would make most people fall off their chair in disbelief. You'll think it's a bad comedy act, except the American taxpayer paid tens of millions of dollars for things like what happens if monkeys drink a lot. Well, they get drunk, they become alcoholic, and they have bad tissue. It's a pretty simple study. But we spent millions on that. And I think that when we come back after this, when we get through this coronavirus case, there's going to be a reckoning for the NIH community, National Institutes of Health, which funds all this research. $40 billion a year. We should have been able to find the money to find those antidotes for coronavirus long before this pandemic broke out.
One would hope that some of that, hopefully, will be addressed as the money is spent from this $2 trillion plan that we worked on today. John Solomon, Just the News is the organization. Thank you, John. Good to see you. Appreciate it. Well, a little cuteness now to lift your spirits. The Atlanta Humane Society releasing a pair of puppies to explore the Georgia Aquarium. Look at them. This is closed, of course, to the public because of the coronavirus outbreak, but the video showing the two curious canines roaming through the empty exhibit halls, bringing some much-needed joy to viewers in very difficult times. The shelter writing on social media, the puppies had their best day ever. Coming up next, we're still awaiting President Trump and his coronavirus task force. We'll bring you their daily briefing once it begins. Plus, the New York Times finding a way to cast blame on Christians for the coronavirus. Pastor Robert Jeffress is here after these quick messages to talk about that and many other things. Stay with us.
Finding a way to blame it on the Christians. Wow. For the coronavirus. I'm sure that will soothe the minds and the hearts of those locally around here, especially up the road here, give or take about a quarter of a mile, pertaining to an occult called the Wiccans. This is going to end this particular process or this particular deal here at the Windmill Ministries. We want to thank each and every one of you for allowing for us to be a part of your lives in this historical event that has happened today, in finally getting the White House to acknowledge the seriousness of all this and bringing forth a stimulus package that will hopefully be a injection in the arm towards getting the economy back up and going again once we finally get this coronavirus, this monkey off our backs. But I promise you, the coronavirus, if you want to look at it in the perspective that it's the Christians' fault, it's all of our faults because of the sin and the wickedness of society. It's not just one particular sector. It's not just the Americans' fault. It's not just the China's fault. It's not just the atheists' fault. It's not just the Christians' fault. It's not just the agnostic people's fault. It's all of our faults, including myself, in this historical event that has happened today that is very, very monumental. This is March 27th, the year 2020. Good luck to all of us, and shalom. And welcome to the 21st century.